Hello, my beautiful friends. What an amazing day it is. Welcome back. I hope your weekend was absolutely outstanding and your week is off to an incredible start. We're very glad you're here. We have a heck of a stream planned today. Quick preview, then we'll zoom in for further detail. But fresh out of the oven today, just moments ago, an emergency motion to stop what's happening in the James Comey prosecution. We had a very aggressive order that came down from Judge Fitzpatrick. He is the magistrate judge, and now we have a request to the actual judge, the district court judge in the Eastern District of Virginia, saying you got to stop this lower level judge from doing what he's doing. And we'll go through this because this is pretty critical. We're fighting over grand jury materials. We've been keeping our eye on this. Of course, Lindsay Halligan is the one presiding over this prosecution, and they're getting into it. So we'll go through this, an emergency motion now just hitting the docket. We'll backfill exactly what's going on. We got the memo from the judge. It's almost like a mini appeal. You can think about it from the magistrate judge to the district court judge saying, okay, you know, this guy's helping you with stuff, but he's really screwing it up. So we'll see what the order said and how bad it is and what exactly they are petitioning the higher judge to fix. Then we'll hear from Todd Blanch himself. He was on talking about Lindsay Halligan in the Comey prosecution and how the future looks for them. And we'll see what Todd has to say about that coming up. Then we'll talk about Thomas Matthew Crooks, the individual who was shot and killed after trying to shoot and kill President Trump. And we've seen some very interesting reporting on this fella over the past couple days, over the weekend. Of course, Tucker Carlson came out with a great 30-minute documentary on this fella, the most we've learned about him since it happened, coming from Tucker, of course. But then we see Miranda Devine, two people who were the subject of the FBI rapid response attacks who were coming after them over the weekend. The first two people that they came out swinging against were conservatives for whatever reason, Tucker and Miranda. And so they both now are reporting more than the FBI is. So Miranda comes back and she says, this is very interesting. Turns out this dude may have been using they, them pronouns and may also be a furry. Oh, gosh. So we'll talk about exactly what that means, but there's going to be a conversation about that. So if you've got kids around, you might have to explain that. Hopefully not, but we'll talk about it. You see a furry fetish? So we'll get into it. We've got updates on that. We got some photos over from the Gateway pundit. Some of them are very strange. We'll talk about those. And we've got reaction on this. The president, very unhappy with what happened on January 6th, demanding more arrests. Kash Patel was kind of needled into a response. We'll see what he says before we hear from him on with Maria Bartiromo now hitting the media. So all of that coming up. Then we got some Epstein business to attend to, baby, because the Oversight Committee says, oh, Democrats got caught red-handed spreading a hoax about Epstein. Yeah, they did. And they gave us a real nice thread on this. We'll go through it, and we'll also see how the Democrats had to delete this scandalous lie. Unfortunately, it would be nice if they did that for all of their other lies. But the president, Trump, came out. He said, release the files. All right, finally. We all got a little whiplash on this story. Like, oh, wait, release them. No, don't release them. Release them. What's happening over here? So we'll come back. We'll talk about it. And then we got more reaction. Anna Paulina Luna, Thomas Massie, the Epstein survivors, Chuck Schumer, and a bunch of other stuff from Johnson. And even the president himself was talking about it today from the Oval Office. But before we get into anything, my friends, I want to just pause and say prayers up for our friend Nate the lawyer. He is a lawyer who goes by the name Nate, and he's amazing. He is on YouTube. He's everywhere, and we've had the pleasure of hanging out with him once or twice before, I think talking about the illegally constituted January 6th Select Committee, and we had a great time. He's a gentleman, a real nice guy. He's got an awesome YouTube channel and a great community over there, and he's out for a little bit getting surgery on his brain tumor. So we're just pausing, saying prayers up for our friend Nate. Looks like he just posted an update, said, here is my brain tumor. Surgery had to be postponed because it's massive. Will be under the knife on Wednesday. So that's coming up soon. And I'm not a radiologist, but he circled for us the problem. And I don't think that white stuff is supposed to be there. So hopefully those doctors, by the grace of God and the healing energy beamed into this room, they're able to get in there and get that out. And Nate's going to be back with us in no time, no doubt about it. So prayers up for Nate. We wish him well, and we send good healing, love, and energy right into that room. So we'll keep our eye on that, my friends. But of course, if you're over there, make sure you send him some love too, because that's a big deal. And I know it's very unexpected. So shout out to Nate and everybody out there who is supporting him. I think on civil law, some other people are in there with him. So prayers out. All right. So now, my friends, let's get into business on the day, because we got some business to attend to. Let's do it. An emergency motion filed by Lindsay Halligan in the prosecution of James Comey, the former FBI director, for lying to Congress and for obstructing Congress. And we've been battling about the grand jury materials for a long time. As we know, grand jury materials are usually under lock and key, very sealed, a very sacred part of our process. And Comey wants to get his hands on it because we know as part of the process, there was some evidence about prior search warrants from when Comey was lying back in 2019 and 2020, when the FBI was investigating themselves and they found they did nothing wrong. They like to investigate themselves, sometimes way too much. Stop it. So they do it over and over again. And there's a bunch of evidence back then. And back then, before this current prosecution, we saw that those search warrants may have recovered materials that were between James Comey and his lawyer back then, called Fitzgerald. Well, guess who's his current lawyer right now in this case? Fitzgerald. It's the same dude. So they really want to get their hands on this so they can say, oh crap, what happened there? And they want to make the argument that there was some privilege breach that justifies a dismissal of this entire case. And so right now it may feel like it's inconsequential. Grand jury transcripts, materials, evidence, whatever. They are looking for a basis to dismiss the entire prosecution. And the judge who is presiding over it right now, we've got two people we have to pay attention to. One is the district level judge, the actual judge who's appointed in the Eastern District of Virginia or to that court. We also have a magistrate judge, and magistrate judges will handle a lot of the, kind of the piddly stuff. All right, come on here, go see the judge. The judge will make some rulings, and then you have an opportunity to basically appeal it up within the court to the actual district court judge who is over the case officially. So that's what's happening right here. So Lindsay Halligan, you can see, we'll do a little background before we get to their emergency motion, but this one's coming out from Gabriel J. Diaz from the Lindsay Halligan prosecution team, fresh out of the oven today. And they're responding to an order that came down over the weekend. And so we've got two different documents from the judge. And the judge, of course, as we've already seen, is this guy, William E. Fitzpatrick. He's a magistrate judge, the lower level on the totem pole over there. And we've already had problems with him. He's saying, we're going to do this. We're going to do that. Lindsay Halligan has objected to him, and he's been basically reversed or talked to previously here. We've talked about it, but now we've got another one. And so we're just seeing this pattern of this dude is trying to help Comey. But here he wrote in an order and issued a full memo. And he basically said, pursuant to the real judges, Judge Michael Nachmanoff's order that remanded the matter of disclosure of the grand jury back to me for further proceedings, I need to go in, right? The judge already stopped him on this, we already said, can you please stay the release of this stuff? They went up to the real judge, Nachmanoff. He already said you screwed up before once. So now this is the response to, sorry, I screwed up. Okay, so you're sorry about that, judge, the main judge. I was supposed to have our particularized and factually based grounds for disclosing these grand jury materials. And so that's what I've done. You said I actually had to do my job, so that's what I've done. And I wrote a whole memo, okay, that is now going to be filed concurrently with this order. And now I think, now that I've done my actual job as a judge, now I think that Comey has made a factually based showing of the need for these materials that nobody ever gets anywhere ever. Trump didn't get them. No J6ers got them. Nobody gets grand jury materials. It's basically impossible. So accordingly, he says, dun, 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 it is now ordered that by 3 p.m. today, the clerk of the court shall make available all the grand jury materials that were filed under seal by the government. Okay, so in other words, the judge just did like a little 1-2 punch over here. He's not saying, hey, DOJ, give it to them. The DOJ has already given it to the judge. The judge is just saying, oh, now I'm going to give it to you, Comey. Thank you, DOJ. Also ordered that the government shall no later than today, 5 p.m., produce to the defense a complete audio recording. Okay, so now that is going from the prosecution to the defense. And also ordered that the clerk of the court shall file on the public docket a version of the memo opinion that we're going to look at right now before Lindsay Halligan and their team came skidding in here. Stop, you can't do this. Main judge. And it's also ordered that all of this shall be published and now signed on November 17th by William E. Fitzpatrick. And so that is also fresh out of the oven today. And he attached this memo to it. And let's take a look at this before we get to Halligan so we know what she's responding to. And what she is saying is inaccurate in this opinion. In other words, the judge is perverting the basis for the release of these materials to their friend Comey, saying, all right, this is from the judge, the lower level magistrate judge called Fitzpatrick. Same last name as James Comey's defense attorney. No relation, I'm sure. Says this matter is before the court, but it is weird how that happens. We also saw that in the E. Jean Carroll case, her defense attorney, remember the, painting wooded trees lady who got Bergdorf in the dressing room at Bergdorf's, according to somebody, said her attorney was Roberta Kaplan. Who was the judge over that case? Judge Kaplan, right? Pretty sure. So it's like weird how that happens a lot. Anyways, no relation, I'm sure. For the reasons set forth below, the court finds that the record requires James Comey gets everything because they've raised serious questions about Halligan and Trump's DOJ's misconduct. And it may have tainted the grand jury proceedings. This is what I'm saying. They want to, if their grand jury proceedings are tainted, then the entire basis for the charges are all tainted. And what do you have to do about that? You have to dismiss the case, don't you? So thank you, Judge. Disclosure of grand jury materials is necessary to protect James Comey. They give us some background. All right. On October 13th, the government moved for implementation of a filter protocol. Halligan and the prosecutors, they said, hey, there might be privileged materials in here. We're seizing materials and have seized materials. And some of what we have in our investigative folder looks like it might be attorney-client privileged. We need a filter team to come separate the privilege from the non-privilege. The material was seized back in 2019 and 2020. That is not the year that we are in currently. So long time ago. It's not, in other words, Lindsay Halligan didn't come in here and go seize this stuff. This stuff was already in the possession of the DOJ or the FBI to court authorized warrants in a different district and as part of a separate investigation. So she comes in, it's like boxes of goodies. You're like, whoa, what's in here? Oh, says the defense opposed the motion, Comey, in part on grounds that the information the government sought to review was improperly retained after the conclusion of the prior investigation. So Comey says, any of that stuff in that box, once that investigation was closed, it was hands off. You can't go in there and look at that stuff. Nope, it's illegal. And it was improperly used in this investigation. And she's like, you got those files too? Huh? And the government had already accessed potentially privileged information. And of course, Comey was sending letters back and forth with this lawyer under the guise of attorney-client privilege and then hires the same dude who knows exactly what went down. Now, rather than institute a filter protocol, Comey didn't want to do that. The defense said, hey, judge, we know you're on our side. Why don't you make the government, Halligan, disclose information related to how they got that info? They said, well, this concerns, attorney-client privilege, and it's not hypothetical. What happens if the prosecutors have been exposed to attorney-client privilege materials? And it's such a joke. I mean, the double standard in our justice system just makes my blood boil, as I'm sure it does yours. But remember when Beryl Howell out of the D.C. District Court breached Trump's attorney-client privilege, made all of his lawyers come in there and testify and just say, attorney-client privilege schmivlage, get out of here. No one cares about it. But here, the judge is like indulging in this. Oh my gosh, what if a FBI agent saw an email? They didn't care about that when they raided Trump's entire house in Melania's underwear drawer, sick freaks. On October 29th, we remember Judge Nachmanoff, the real judge, entered an order. He said that briefing on the government's filter protocol raises several legal questions, and we have to be resolving these before we authorize anything. And then Comey responded, and the judge appointed this judge to preside over all of this stuff. Anything about privileged materials, this judge is like, you handle this. Okay, it's like assigning like an intern to it. You're an intern judge. All right, I got this project for you. On November 5th, this judge held a hearing on the government's motion for a filter protocol. Now, following that hearing, the court ordered the government to give these materials over to the defense so they can assert any claims of privilege, and also ordered the government not to review any of the materials at issue until these disputes are resolved. The court ordered the government to give additional information to Comey about the search and the prior use of those materials from Comey's prior investigations. And remember, the FBI, basically what they were doing is, I think they called it Arctic Haze. And these were leaks related to Arctic frost. And there were like 7 of them that we got in that one disclosure. In other words, the FBI had leaks coming out of their office. They opened 7 different, we have the mind map saved somewhere, 7 different investigations into themselves and found nothing. And so maybe search warrants were issued back then and there was actually an investigation. Maybe it is Comey. Maybe it is. And they go and they, oh, no, it's not us. It was Comey in emails to Daniel Richmond. But nobody got prosecuted for anything. So they say the government then appealed this court's order. Okay, we've already been down this road. This Fitzpatrick came back and said, do all this stuff. Halligan says, you can't make us do that, whack judge. And then takes this up to the higher judge. The higher judge sent it back down, said, actually, yeah, you screwed up. You got to do your job. You got to find particularized a basis for this. Here said, this court, you didn't make sufficient enough findings. The district judge, the real judge, then remanded the matter. He said, actually, yeah, Halligan, you're right. Why don't you go and take this case back and actually do a good job this time? Why don't you analyze, like you're supposed to, whether there are particularized and factually based grounds for disclosure? Think you can do that, Fitzpatrick? So then he says, yeah, I can't find. Then on November 10th, everybody filed briefs addressing the disclosure of grand jury materials. We read through some of those. In its brief, the government said, why don't you look at the grand jury materials in camera? We've been seeing these emails, the evidence now be published on the public docket. We know that there were burn bags. We know that Comey was writing in handwritten notes about pure knowledge about the HRC plan to tie Trump. He knew all about this and lied about it to Congress. And the list goes on, including emails saying that President-elect Clinton will be very happy with me. Also mentioning that he got 600,000 of her deleted emails on the Wiener laptop and then was doing everything he could to finagle that. Just writing the Congress, oops, we found a bunch of records that I lied to you about. Sorry about that, right before the election. Remember all that scam? Yeah, we do. The same day, on November 10th, 2025, the court held a telephonic hearing, and I think we got the transcripts on that. And it granted the government's request to provide these materials to the judge. Now, the court, having considered all of this, the briefs, the oral arguments, the grand jury materials, and more, I have now finally done my job. I actually have done a particularized and factually based grounds for giving Comey these records that the defense basically never gets. The long-established policy of maintaining the secrecy of grand jury proceedings is codified in the rules of criminal procedure. However, there are exceptions to this. And in this case, in other words, the rules say you don't get access to grand jury materials. There's a bunch of reasons why for this, and it's really supposed to ensure the independence of the process. And as we talked about, it goes all the way back kind of to the English crown and our common law. You wanted a separate body so that the crown couldn't come in there and interfere with what's happening in closed doors and then pervert the prosecution. Stop a prosecution for their favored allies and enhance prosecutions for their favored enemies. We saw that translate over to the founding fathers. We had a case where somebody was talking smack against the English governor. They tried to indict him, but our grand jury of American colonists, before America broke away, of course, they decided that they did not want to indict that person. So the grand jury was secret. He did not get indicted. Then they tried to prosecute him elsewhere, and he was ultimately acquitted. But it's to ensure the independence. We don't want trials on trials, like a semi-public trial in the grand jury proceedings and then a fully public trial. And so there's a bunch of reasons for it. But the point is, you don't get it. But there are exceptions to this that are almost never accommodated unless you're a Democrat deep state hack. In this case, Mr. Comey seeks access to these materials in order to move for dismissal of the indictment. He wants the whole thing gone, which is why we're spending enough time on this, because honestly, the judge may grant some of this, based on alleged irregularities in the grand jury proceedings. Accordingly, the relevant exception here is this one, which allows me to authorize disclosure because I think there may be a grounds to dismiss the indictment. Okay, some hack magistrate judge is setting us up to dismiss Comey's entire case. A majority of courts have held that the appropriate standard that a Comey must meet is a particularized need. And there's all this case law from this case and abscessus and another one from the 8th Circuit and another one from the 7th Circuit. And here's what these rules means. And here's what the courts in this district have said about it. And that's the rules section. But then we get to some background. In 2017, we learned that the U.S. Attorney's Office, so 2017, okay, this is like right in the throes of the Russia collusion hoax, Obama and the Comey Clapper cabal with Brennan, they were all January 6, 2017, talking about the new ICA Russia collusion that was all made up with Hillary Clinton's scam, Steele dossier appendix stuck in the back, like to Brennan's shoe. They initiated an investigation called Arctic Haze. Different from Arctic Frost. Now, this investigation concerned an allegation of unauthorized disclosure of classified information to the New York Times. Yeah, and we've talked about this before. They investigated themselves. Comey was running his fat mouth over to Daniel Richmond, the law professor, so-called from Columbia, and then stuff was ending up in the New York Times. Golly. And they investigated themselves like, wow, where's this coming from? I don't know. The FBI director, you idiots. Have you looked at the top, your boss? Just read the articles. Like, who would know about this stuff? Like Comey's inner workings of his head. James Comey would. Comey tried to shield the FBI from politics. It's literally the headline. What are you talking about Comey's intent? Where would that come from? Somebody other than Comey is what the FBI thought, apparently. Then he shaped an election. The investigation focused on the article's inclusion of classified info related to one of the factors that influenced Comey. So leaking classified info to the media. To unilaterally announce the closure of the then director of the FBI and their investigation into Hillary Clinton, the whole cover-up scam, for sending classified information while she was Secretary of State, which she did, and then they deleted all the emails. Daniel Richmond, a Columbia Law School professor and a personal friend of Mr. Comey, and a former government employee at the FBI, was quoted in the article and was the subject of the investigation. So then they go get warrants. In 19 and 20, the FBI obtained 4 warrants authorizing agents to search a hard drive, an iCloud account, an iPad, and an iPhone belonging to Mr. Richmond, as well as 2 Columbia University email accounts used by Richmond, referred to as the Richmond warrants. Comey was sending him emails. That's how they got him, through Richmond. They didn't execute warrants for Comey. They went after Daniel. Now, the Richmond warrants, and Comey's like, Daniel Richmond? Why did he get search warrants? I don't know. The Richmond warrants, he was emailing him. The Richmond warrants authorized agents to search for and seize information created between March 1, 16 and May 30th, 17 that constituted evidence of violations of theft or conversion of government property, unlawful gathering of national defense information, and all these search warrants. Wow. Richmond must be like, why am I getting searched by the FBI? This is so weird. I was just doing what Comey told me to do. And Comey, of course, is going to cover up on the other end, right? Put pressure to make sure nothing happens from any of these warrants because it's all one big, disgusting, incestuous family over there. The information seized pursuant to these warrants during the Arctic Haze investigation is now at the center of a dispute between the parties in the case. So Comey right now is thinking, well, how can they prove that I lied about these materials to Congress? How can they prove that I obstructed any of this? Well, they have these investigations that the FBI conducted on themselves. Of course, back in 2019 and 20, Comey's already gone. Then these searches, happen. Christopher Wray helps cover it up on the back end. The record reflects that in 19 and 20, the government took modest and, as it turned out, ineffective steps to identify and isolate privileged info contained in the materials. So in other words, Comey was sending emails, many of them apparently, allegedly, contain classified information to his attorney. And then the attorney would send it out to other people. And now that would create a privilege shield, a force field. You can't come after me. I sent it to my lawyer. And they're invoking that right now. Pretty smart. Now, of course, when Trump invoked that, there's another exception to attorney-client privilege called the crime fraud exception, right? And whether or not that privilege survives, if your attorney's using that privilege to further or commit another crime, which may or not have been happening here. But for example, they say the government permitted Columbia University to review the emails seized from Columbia's email accounts. So some people at Columbia may have seen Comey's dirty words to him. The government also provided the law professor, Richmond, and his counsel back then with so in other words, then the government goes and wrecks the case. So then they say, oh yeah, why don't you guys all look at this material so we can taint it. So if you ever need to use it, we can just say, oh, all of your privilege was breached, so the case can't be prosecuted. Sorry, we screwed it up. Amazing. The government also provided Richmond and his lawyers an opportunity to review this. And the government claims that the documents and communications were never reviewed as part of the Arctic Haze investigation, if they were privileged, right? So the government says, we didn't look at any privileged information. There is no taint anywhere. However, this judge says, the government never engaged Comey in the process. And Comey was emailing with Richmond. And we just looked all through Richmond's stuff. And so you're protecting Richmond's privilege, but not Comey's privilege. And so now, unfortunately, you've tainted everything. And now James Comey can't be prosecuted. Isn't that nice how the government does that for their own? Says, even though it knew that Richmond represented Mr. Comey as his lawyer, and 3 of the 4 search warrants that were authorized to go into this dude's emails were after the attorney-client relationship had been formed. In fact, an Office of the Inspector General report also noted that Comey informed the OIG that the day after his removal, he retained attorneys Patrick Fitzgerald, David Kelly, and Daniel Richmond. So he goes in, he hires the same people that he's leaking to, and now everything becomes privileged. And you need a shield. These guys are not dumb. Okay, they're all engineering this. Patrick Fitzgerald's the same dude who was receiving emails from Comey back in 19 and 20. Then they just start sharing it with everybody, and the investigation wrecks the criminal charges that the DOJ can bring, which is why they're investigating themselves and finding nothing, right? It's a paper over the file, so nobody can get charged with anything. And it's working out brilliantly. You can see it on display. And the judges are like, wait a minute. According to an April 29, 2020 letter from Mr. Richmond's then attorney to the government, produced to the court ex parte by the defense, the DOJ informed Richmond that the data that it got from his iCloud account went all the way to 2019, way outside the scope of the warrant, and well past the date on which Mr. Richmond was retained as Comey's attorney. Now, the same letter also states, so the judge is upset that it's overbroad, says the same letter states that the DOJ informed Richmond that it had seized evidence from Richmond's hard drive that extended to 17 again, well into the period where Richmond represented Comey. And so you can't use any of that evidence because the judge is imputing that there's a breach of privilege, which is a joke. Now, at the time Richmond warrants were executed, the government was aware not only that Richmond represented Comey, so Comey has him as his lawyer, and Comey is leaking to him, so now you can't investigate the Comey leaking to Richmond, but also that he maintained ongoing attorney-client relationships with other individuals, and that the FBI materials about his resignation as an SGE, special government employee, noted his intention to represent another defendant in another criminal prosecution. And so, as a result, when the government got the first warrant in 19 for Richmond, it was foreseeable that there may have been privileged materials, including on Comey. Nevertheless, the government, and this was Christopher Wray's FBI, made a conscious decision to exclude Mr. Comey from the filter process, thereby tainting and wrecking the evidence. Even though Comey, as the client, is the privilege holder, is not Mr. Richmond, and so you have to protect Comey when you're going through Richmond's files. The government claimed at the hearing that Richmond, at the time himself, was the subject of another criminal investigation for the leaks that they couldn't find. Who's leaking? We don't know. They get all of his emails. All the emails say it's, they have the emails. They know. The FBI knew that it was Comey. Was in a position to effectively assert Comey's privilege is entirely unreasonable. And then maybe during that investigation, Wray saying, well, Comey was emailing with his lawyer. You can't look at any of those things. Of equal concern is whether the government, this is the judge speaking, whether the government complied with the Fourth Amendment. And you may only see certain materials. And this was overbroad. And this is a violation of Comey's Fourth Amendment privileges against unlawful search and seizure. Here, the government was permitted to search all of the materials, but they took too much and they exceeded the scope of the warrant, but both markedly different offenses. And Comey's charged with these two offenses, but in other words, the investigation got too much evidence against them, and you're not allowed to do that. Now, there is nothing in the record to suggest the government made any attempt to identify what materials received from Daniel were evidence of violations of these crimes. And the warrants, in other words, the warrants are for other crimes than what Comey is being charged with. And so the evidence is not exactly for these crimes. They were for different crimes, which was, Richmond was the subject of the warrant. So they're going to say, did you unlawfully receive national, in other words, national defense information charges, which is not what Comey's being charged with. Comey's being charged with lies to Congress, not classified anything where Richmond was. So the warrant was for different things. So even though you found the evidence, you can't use it because it's not for those charges. Now, when the undersigned questioned the attorney on this case to say, how did you get these warrants? He says, I don't know. Well, we have them in our possession. Following the hearing on November 5th, they said, we want you to produce everything that you've got. The government gave the materials over, but they say it wasn't responsive to what they wanted. The potential failure by the government now is even more concerning because the warrant that was issued back in 2019 specifically directed the government to identify what information was responsive to the warrant. Yeah, and it's like when they investigate themselves, they also do it in the worst possible way. Okay, yeah, we need a warrant for what? Well, we want to check the third file drawer in the basement on the right closet. See if there's anything in there. They know there's nothing in there. Oh, would you like to check the entire basement? No, definitely not. No. Just that one closet with that one manila file folder in there. You open it up. Oh, we searched for it. Couldn't find what was happening. And then they investigate themselves 7 times. And then they find no results. And nobody knows who's leaking. And it's the FBI director who's leaking. That's literally our FBI. It's really so disgusting and sick. The government appears to have conflated its obligation to protect privileged information. The entire Arctic Haze investigation was closed and no charges were filed. The Richmond materials were dormant, and then the Bureau chose to rummage through them again. This hack judge, that is evidence. The fraudulent FBI that was covering up for James Comey and Daniel Richmond, they're the ones that closed the investigation. They're the ones that came to the conclusion that there were no charges capable of being filed. That's obviously a bad investigation. And a different FBI, much more competent and honest, they can come in and review the same evidence to determine whether there in fact was a crime. It's not like the evidence expires with the changing of the administration. Oh, well, this dude, attacked 50 people, but we couldn't charge him in time. And we closed the investigation. And now there's nothing we can do about it because we're incompetent. It's like, that's not how that works. If there's evidence and there's time, you can prosecute them, okay? The 2025 search of the materials then came back out. So now Trump comes in 2025. Of course, Trump was in back then during 19 and 20, but it was the Christopher Wray FBI. By the summer of 25, this year, the FBI at the Eastern District, now Lindsay Halligan, had initiated a criminal investigation into Comey. Another FBI agent was instructed to review a Blu-ray disc that contained a full Cellbrite extraction and reader reports of Mr. Richmond's phone. Now, inexplicably, the judge says, the government elected not to seek a new warrant for this new search, even though the 2025 investigation was focused on a different person, was exploring fundamentally different legal theories, different charges, and was predicated on an entirely different set of criminal offenses. So you need a new warrant to go look at this evidence from Comey's lawyer that is just damning for Comey. You can't use that, even though it's in the government's possession lawfully. They got it as a result of another valid warrant. You can't use that evidence against somebody else unless you go get another warrant for it. The court recognizes that a failure to seek a new warrant is highly unusual, says this magistrate judge that nobody knows anything about. The court also recognized, like, what, you know, do you want to give us some background on this? Do you want to give us some explanation on it? Maybe he will. The court also recognizes that seeking a new warrant would have required a fresh legal analysis and resulted in a delay. And the statute of limitations was going to expire in 18 days from the moment the investigation was opened. And so this is why we've been hitting the panic button on the FBI and the DOJ here. I know it can be agitating to people. You know, Cash and Pam and Dan are doing a great job and they're working really hard. And like, look at all these numbers they post all the time. Okay, we got it. That's great. But the clock is ticking on a lot of things. So unless there's action on it, then we're just not going to have any action on it because the time is going to expire. And then all of the lecturing about how hard we're working and all the things is not going to matter. Okay. It's about points on the board. Just look at the scoreboard. Doesn't matter how hard you work or how many shots you take. What's the end score on this? Is there going to be justice or not? So my point is that we got to keep, we got to keep going. Like we got to keep the tension up on this because the clock is ticking. It's going to be 2026 very soon, 5 years after January 6th. Statute of limitations on crimes expires for many of them. If a new warrant had been sought by the government, the Fourth Amendment would have required it to be narrowly tailored, and it's way too overbroad. And you seized a bunch of stuff that are just items that are devastating for James Comey. And so I'm going to go through and twist myself into a pretzel to try to carve out the evidence that is damning for our client's case. In this case, the judge is basically representing Comey. Having decided to forge ahead in these highly unusual circumstances, everything's so strange for this judge. Everything should be conducted by career prosecutors and take 15 years to do anything. The FBI agent conducting the search was instructed to look at conversations between Richmond and Comey. There appeared to be no precautions for the privileged communications that were there. And so this is now tainted. And another agent got new materials, and these materials are just damning. We've read them here. Comey was literally explaining the innards of very, very sensitive investigations to his BFF Richmond. Maybe on a long walk at the beach, before they found the seashells together. The government presented this case to the grand jury then on September 25th. Okay, clock was ticking. Like 5 days later, case expires. We're SOL, the statute of limitations. Yeah, and SOL if we miss it. The same day prior to the grand jury presentment, Agent 2 alerted the lead case agent and an attorney that there was evidence that might be attorney-client privilege in this material. It's also possible, of course, because Comey was sending it to lawyers and then using that as a force field to protect against further investigations. Whereas this judge is not doing what Judge Beryl Howell did when she breached Trump's attorney-client privilege without even thinking about it. It's like, well, there might be evidence of a crime. What evidence? Well, I don't know. Stealing an election, democracy. Whatever. Okay, this judge could have easily written an opinion just like Beryl's, but she didn't. She went the other way. It's also possible that agents may have obtained evidence that constitutes attorney work product information. Yeah, and it's also possible that James Comey's lawyers were also co-conspirators in the case, and that attorney-client privilege may not even apply to any of this, and that the DOJ can rummage through whatever they want since it's not privileged at all. You could come to that conclusion. This judge, of course, didn't. Now, only after the government looked at these materials, only after they'd personally identified these materials, did they get an indictment. Did they finally then seek court approval? And so you tainted a bunch of this info. And so now the court has reviewed this info. And the government says, look at the evidence. Okay, we gave information to the grand jury, and there was no privileged information that was shared with the grand jury at all. They didn't see anything that they weren't supposed to see. And their decision to indict was valid and not tainted. Judge says, while it is true that the undersigned, the judge, did not immediately recognize any overtly privileged communications, this judge was like screaming through this entire hearing to try to find anything that was privileged to kick this and dismiss this entire case. But he didn't. It's equally true that the materials seized from the warrants were the cornerstone of the grand jury presentation. So he doesn't like the evidence. Yeah. The government substantially relied on statements involving Comey and Richmond. Agent 3 referred to these statements in multiple questions from the prosecutor. And The jurors were just given a limited overview of privileged communications that were damning, that were crimes, or evidence or indicia of a crime. In our opinion, they should have breached those privileged communications in the first place. But the government and the position that privileged materials were not directly shared ignores the unacceptable prospect that privileged materials were used to shape the government's presentation. And so the evidence wasn't privileged, but it was kind of privileged, and it was really bad for the jurors to see it. And again, here we go. So is there like a legal principle? Having been requested by the government to review this, there also appear to be fundamental misstatements of law. First, after having advised the grand jurors that the prosecutor was their legal advisor, the prosecutor stated redacted. And this is a misstatement of the law. And it suggests to the jury that Comey doesn't have a Fifth Amendment right not to testify. So maybe it's like, something like what I would infer is like, Comey could explain himself, but he didn't. That, he didn't respond to our something, he can testify. He doesn't have a right to testify. And if you say that his silence should be used against him, you're infringing on his rights, which is a true statement, but we don't know what the hell was said. The prosecutor's statement that so-and-so something may have reasonably set an expectation in the minds of the jurors. This is like ridiculous, man. This judge, and it might unreasonably set an expectation in the minds of the grand jurors. This judge is like a defense attorney. And second, the prosecutor told the grand jury that there was something. Comey's a piece of work, lying hack. Now, that statement suggested to the grand jury that they don't have to rely on the record before them and that more evidence would come at trial. And so the whole thing's perverted. So now the first indictment that was presented, and there may be other things. The second indictment concluded, was returned. More happened. On November 14th, the prosecutor filed a declaration and then further stated at 6:40. So kind of, the short time span, there was the grand jury rejected one count in the original indictment. They go in, they get a second indictment, sign that indictment, present it, and some more kind of procedural stuff happens. Either way, this unusual series of events, still not fully explained, calls into question the presumption of regularity. And so I might have the ability to dismiss this case. The judge giving us a bunch of case law around this. I think that it has been so tainted because James Comey hired a bunch of lawyers and then used them to shovel information out through them and then basically ensconce the entire case in this attorney-client privilege veil. And this might be prosecutorial misconduct from Lindsay Halligan. And so there is a reasonable basis to challenge the grand jury. The warrants exceeded the scope and there was privileged information inside, and the defense has a right to these materials. 11 different justifications for it. And I know that this stuff is supposed to be very secret and I'm not supposed to give you these things, but I've done my analysis and I am now deciding to release it. Here, the grand jury's role in this case is over. Statute of limitations has expired. Okay, so like if this case gets dumped, there's a good argument it can't come back. Saying the only person to testify before this was a single federal agent. So what? Same thing with like Comey and with Maxwell and Epstein. So what? There are other persons who have information who testified, and the government offered no reason why the grand jury material should be kept. So Comey should get all of the benefits of the doubt and get everything handed to him on a silver platter because this judge, William Fitzpatrick, the magistrate judge, just decides that suddenly the Trump DOJ is doing things improperly and acting with misconduct and now saying, well, all of this was very protected and you're walking around stepping on important, protections of James Comey. And so now the case is on the precipice of getting dumped. You can just feel it in that decision. So James Comey is being prosecuted. And now Lindsay Halligan responds to that ridiculous decision and says, all right, going and talking to the real judge, an emergency motion to stay that lower level order from Fitzpatrick. They say, all right, judge, real judge, not Fitzgerald. The government files this emergency stay of Fitzpatrick's order that directed everybody to to send all of these materials over to Comey by the close of the day. As you know, the rules say the government may serve and file objections after any orders from a magistrate judge. He can't order this stuff to be released immediately. We have to have time to come to you. And so we respectfully ask you to stay this order pending your full consideration of the entire case. Now, although 14 days is contemplated, we only need 1 week. So just give us until November 24th to respond. Here's why. On October 13th from Lindsay Halligan, the government moved for implementation of a filter protocol to filter out the privileged materials. Comey opposed that motion. In response to, in his opposition, he asked the court, tell him to give us all of this grand jury material. October 29th, the court noted that briefing on this raised several questions. And now we have a magistrate judge, this lower level judge gets appointed to preside over this battle. Then Comey filed a motion to disclose this. He said, I'm entitled to it. Disclosure is required because the agents who were in the grand jury proceedings got their hands on my privileged communications, and they're not allowed to do that. Now, under the court's scheduling order, the government filed its response, and a hearing has now been set for December 9th. But during the November 5th hearing on the filter protocol, the lower level judge ordered us to give over all grand jury materials by the close of November 6th. Remember, we've already done this. November 5th, get it out tomorrow. They said, what? On November 6th, the government filed an appeal, said this judge is acting like a maniac. Then on November 7th, the court sent it back to the lower judge and said, you actually have to do your job. Okay, we covered that here. Then on November 10th, he held a telephonic hearing. He said, give me all the materials, I'll look at it. Then on November 17th, that's the day. He said, again, on today, look at this. These judges are such hacks. At 10:38 a.m., the judge files a motion. He says by 3 p.m. on the same day, so that the Trump DOJ doesn't have an opportunity under the rules to lodge their objections to the real judge, release it by 3 p.m., 10:38 by 3 p.m. He would do it by like 11 if he could. 10:38, you got 22 minutes to release it, or else. It's so unfair. I mean, just on its face. And if this were reversed, if Trump were making these arguments, they would have said your attorney was a co-conspirator criminal. We're not upholding privilege. They can look at whatever they want. They had valid warrants. Government has the evidence in their possession. It's inevitable discovery doctrine, whatever. Make up some justification for it, and it would have just been gobbled up. They already did it. They already did it with, I think, Evan Corcoran was Trump's attorney's name. Remember, they brought him in there to testify. They were investigating the Florida case, but they had the hack DC judges like Beryl Howell, all in DC, authorizing and orchestrating the warrants for a nationwide investigation out of DC because they were forum shopping their judges. 10:38 to 3 p.m. Release everything. No time to even appeal. Then they said, release more by 5 p.m. Now, the judge's new order is contrary to the law, and the government should be allowed to object under the rules. Thus, the court should stay this. Under the rules, a district judge may refer to a magistrate judge for determination any of these smaller issues. This is a pretty big issue, but he gave it to this judge. Now, after the magistrate judge, the rules say, quote, after they enter on the record, an oral or written order, which we got, a party may serve and file objections to the order within 14 days. Then the district judge, not the lower judge, must consider timely objections and modify or set aside any part of the order that is contrary to the law or clearly erroneous. And an order is contrary to the law when it misapplies the rules. Now, the long-established rule of keeping grand jury proceedings secret have been ensconced forever. The rule provides just 3 circumstances when you can lift it. And they rely only on one, which allows the court to authorize disclosure if they show there's a grounds to dismiss the indictment. Now, the exception is not an invitation for them to fish around for things. And because grand jury proceedings are entitled to a presumption of regularity, he bears a high burden. We need a particularized and factually based grounds for this. And the judge was doing a lot of like presumptions. Well, the grand jury may have thought this, and it could have thought this. And the statement by Lindsay said that, said this, and that could have been interpreted accordingly. So it's a lot of what ifs and well, maybes and speculative. Now, in deciding whether to release these materials, courts must balance the petitioner's need, Comey's need, faced against the traditional reasons for secrecy in grand jury proceedings. And only in cases where we need it and it outweighs the secrecy will we release it. Now, our position, Halligan's team, is that disclosure of grand jury materials is not warranted under the facts here. And we believe that the lower level judge may have interpreted some facts he found when issuing the latest order. For instance, whether the defendant has any standing to challenge the Richmond materials at all, the full context of the statements made by the prosecutor to the grand jury, that Agent 3 was exposed to potentially privileged materials, and that 2 indictments were presented to the grand jury. Now, additionally, so saying we got some, quibbles with those things. Now, additionally, the lower level judge acknowledges he did not immediately recognize any overtly privileged communications. Yeah, we saw that too. Wait a minute. So they didn't present any of that to the grand jury? No, but it sounded like other things that might have been privileged. Okay, well, they didn't use it, but it was close. Well, did they or not? No, they didn't. Okay, thank you. The possible exposure, possible, was the primary focus, but having settled that issue, he turns to other issues like a suppression that could not have even been briefed by the parties. This judge is just trying to get this case dismissed. And so for the reasons here, the court respectfully requests the court stay this order and give us more time by next week to get a decision on this issue, and hopefully it comes back in our favor. So we know that the judge who signed off on the original order is called William Fitzpatrick, and he's just a magistrate judge. So he's not, a U.S. confirmed district judge. So there's not a lot of information on him, not a lot of stuff out there. He was appointed, I think, back in 2022, been around forever, and apparently maybe feels a special kinship with James Comey's other lawyer, Fitzpatrick. Like, I don't know. Where'd you grow up? Kind of a thing. So all that's going on. We got questions about Lindsay Halligan and her future because they're also trying to disqualify her in the Letish case right here. We got Comey and Letish being prosecuted by Lindsay, who is just as brave as can be, going in here into the lion's den, charging all of these maniacs who at their first opportunity would do the opposite and throw her in jail for no reason whatsoever. But now Todd Blanch, the deputy AG, number 2 at the DOJ, right under Pam Bondi. He was out over the weekend and he was asked about this, saying, what's going on with Lindsay Halligan, Todd?
Todd, if I can, I want to get your reaction to the attempt from James Comey and Letitia James to disqualify Lindsay Halligan from prosecuting those cases against them. They claim that she was appointed unlawfully. They want her removed. And oh, by the way, they want their cases dismissed. What's the reality of this? And what is it that they are wrong about with respect to how they're going about it?
I mean, look, what's happening in Virginia is the same thing that's happening in multiple jurisdictions in this country, which is that President Trump nominates a U.S. attorney, and either the senators refuse to even engage in any sort of negotiation or even interviewing or talking to the individuals that President Trump has nominated, but actually then the judges are stepping in and saying, no, you can't be U.S. attorney. That's not consistent with Article 2 of this Constitution. And look, U.S. Attorney Halligan is doing a phenomenal job in the EDVA, and the argument was last week. We'll see what happens in the coming weeks. But the reality is that there's cases that we have investigated, that have been brought before a grand jury, that have been indicted, and listen, they have a right to come, they have a right to fruition, they have a right to see what happens in front of a jury of the peers. And so what's happening with U.S. Attorney Halligan and multiple U.S. attorneys in this country is something that we're fighting every day, and we'll win. There's no doubt that we'll win at some point, but it's a reflection of what's happening, unfortunately, in this country with the politics of the president talks about it all the time. It's really at its basic level, Trump derangement syndrome, right? Because the president has nominated people, phenomenal attorneys, to be U.S. attorneys, and you have judges, you have senators who have said, no, we're not even going to talk to them, much less even consider letting them work. And so she's doing a great job in Virginia, and I expect that she'll continue doing that.
Yeah, Lindsay Halligan is doing an amazing job. She's the only one that we've seen with really any stones out there in the U.S. attorney's offices who have brought consequential indictments and did it at a rapid pace before the statute of limitations expired, because the other institutionalists at the DOJ, FBI, and elsewhere are just complicit in allowing the clock to expire. Shot clock counts to 0. Oh, no charges for anybody. And they get off scot-free. Meanwhile, they buried evidence in burn bags in closets at the FBI. So we're going to keep pulling for them, but they are up against a battle. As we just saw today, these judges are bending over backwards, twisting themselves into pretzels to come up with legal conclusions that justify a political outcome that they are happy with. And in this case, Fitzpatrick has already been remanded and is just trying to find an escape hatch for Comey. We know why. So Congress needs to do something. The executive branch can only do so much. We've been waging war, politically speaking, against institutional capture in all of the other areas, okay? At the DOJ and the FBI, we're working on those. USAID got gutted. We're working on all of the other entities and institutions. But the judges need to be overseen by Congress. It's their duty in the Constitution to do it. And so these impeachment proceedings need to start gaining some steam so that this bad behavior can be dealt with accordingly. We'll keep our eye on this one, my friends. Thanks for subscribing and joining as we do. All right, now let's turn our attention over to Thomas Matthew Crooks and this bizarre story over courtesy of Miranda Devine. The attempted Trump assassin apparently used they, them pronouns, in addition to being a furry, the thing where they like the animals and put on the costumes or whatever that is. But this story just came down from Miranda Devine, and this comes after Trump also has posted about this that we'll get to. But Tucker also released a video on Thomas Crooks that showed all of his social media identities that the FBI had covered up that we have not seen before. And Miranda and Tucker were the subject of the FBI Rapid Response new account that was saying that they, I guess, are not capable of handling the truth when they're lobbing criticisms at the FBI, a very strange thing. But Cash has also come out and I think kind of been nudged into having to respond to this. He said when it comes to Thomas Matthew Crooks, the guy who tried to take out Trump and did shoot and kill somebody else and injure 2 other people, Cash said the following. You know, over 480 FBI employees were involved in the Thomas Crooks investigation. Employees conducted over 1,000 interviews, addressed over 2,000 public tips, analyzed data extracted from 13 seized digital devices, reviewed nearly 500,000 digital files, collected, processed, and synchronized hundreds of hours of video footage, analyzed financial activity from 10 different accounts, and examined data associated with 25 social media or online form accounts. Like, wow. That's a mouthful, man. That's a lot of numbers there. Hopefully you got something good and you can share that with us after all of that work. Because if you didn't, and there's like really no report or conclusion, then that feels like it's a lot of effort for nothing. The FBI's investigation into Crooks identified and examined over 20 online accounts, data extracted from over a dozen electronic devices, an examination of numerous financial accounts, and over 1,000 interviews and 2,000 public tips. It's like, okay, you just said a lot of that in the first paragraph. Now the investigation conducted by over 480 employees, which you already said, I'm going to mark off for that. We're going to mark off half a letter grade for that. You already said that. Revealed Crooks had limited online and in-person interactions, planned and conducted the attack alone, and did not leak or share his intent to engage in the attack with anybody. Wow. Okay, that's like an F, D- or an F on that. So we got this one sentence conclusion which is mostly ripped off from your introductory paragraph, Cash, up here. We already know. You already repeated that. And this paragraph is also very duplicative of this first paragraph, because you already said 25 social media or online forum accounts, and then you just said that again down here. So it's just like copy and paste garbage. Okay, you need to do this again. You need to take this back home and really put some effort into it. I know you're capable of better than this. We don't do this type of work product, not in this classroom. So we need to try it again. Because if you did all of that work, and you really have all of that stuff, then we deserve more than a crappy sentence at the bottom. Don't appreciate it. So again, we get more information, not from the FBI or Director Cash. They do a lot of work over there for very little outcome. They investigated themselves 7 times under Arctic Haze, couldn't indict anybody. Now the evidence they got from those investigations can't be used to indict anybody. Great job. And then it's like they're just driving around in circles over and over again, just looking at documents and just, I guess, investigating nothing that they can share with us. What a joke. So again, Tucker comes out and releases actual information. And so does Miranda Devine, the 2 people that the FBI Rapid Response Team came out and tried to dunk on. So Miranda came out and said, actually, okay, this dude was a furry. FBI didn't want to talk about that for whatever reason. Kash Patel doesn't want to talk about that for whatever reason. But she reported on this. We're all owed a better explanation from the FBI and the Secret Service. Preach, Miranda. About the attempted assassination of Donald Trump 16 months ago at a campaign rally in Butler. Yes, the president himself remains unsatisfied with this. And the answers that he's been given. This dude climbed onto a rooftop and almost killed him. Did kill somebody else. That a lot of people, I think, just kind of, forget because like Trump got shot in the head. But comparator got murdered. And then they just hose down the assassin's blood. Nobody knows what happened. Here's 2 photographs of him. We've seen these before. Dry firing in his room. Crooks was shot dead by a sniper after he killed Corey Comparator and seriously wounded David Dutch, 58, James Kupenhaver, who were sitting in the bleachers behind Trump. Now, there is something very wrong with the official story. Trump demanded answers months ago, but we got a little crappy paragraph from Kash Patel. That's an F, okay? Everybody would fail him here. Even if you like Kash, you're like, come on. The FBI, Chris Wray, told Congress after July 13th attack that the Bureau had found nothing in his online history that pointed to a motive. We can't figure it out. He was just bored. A week later, Paul Abate, the deputy, he told Congress that comments posted on one of Crooks' social media accounts appears to reflect anti-Semitic and anti-immigration themes to espouse political violence that were described as extreme in nature. There's that liar, Christopher Wray. Now, thanks to an enterprising source, Miranda says, who uncovered Crooks' hidden digital footprint, we can now see that the FBI's Abate misled Congress by omission. Yeah, because he left out an entire section of Crooks' online interactions from January to August 2022, when he did an ideological backflip and went from rabidly pro-Trump to rabidly anti-Trump, then went dark, never posted again. Among the 17 accounts uncovered by our source were the ones that we've seen. And if you watch the Tucker thing, I'd encourage you to watch that. It's very good. YouTube, Snapchat, Venmo, Zelle, GroupMe, Discord, Google Play, Quizlet, Chess, Quora. The online interactions from when Crooks was ages 15 to 17 gave us a better understanding of who this was and who may have reversed his ideology and how and why. The danger that Crooks posed was visible for years. His radicalization, rhetoric, and more wasn't hidden. He was posting all over the internet. The official narrative said he acted alone and did not have a clear ideology, but the source found reams of evidence and info that show, quote, Crooks was not simply some unknowable lone actor. He left a digital trail of violent threats, extremist ideology, admiration for mass violence. He spoke openly of political assassination, posted under his real name, and was even flagged by other users who mentioned law enforcement in their replies. Like, oh, FBI's like, oh, perfect. Yeah, we're going to use this guy to, as a sleeper cell. We'll activate him when needed. Despite this, his account remained active for more than 5 years, was only removed the day after the shooting. Now, none of his online activity was referenced in the final congressional report. Congress had no idea. Here's your final congressional report. They missed all of this. Like, our government's a joke, or they're liars. Probably both. None of this activity was even referenced in the official report. And they say it's an ongoing investigation. So ordinarily you might have, like the DHS, Office of Inspector General, or the DOJ, Office of the Inspector General, some independent agency who's within the division to come in and review a critical scene. No report from them because it's all ongoing. And Kash Patel gave us a little crappy sentence about what they found, which is obviously not true. Says he left a digital trail of violent threats, extremist ideology, and admiration for mass violence. Kash didn't mention any of that. He spoke openly of political assassination, posted under his real name, and was even flagged by other users. None of his online activity was referenced. Starting with Crooks' phone number, the source used tools available to private investigators and web archives to uncover the very online persona of this dude. Most public account was YouTube. 737 public comments under the account name Tom Crooks. Created back in 19, suspended in July 24, the day after the attack. Crooks' trajectory flipped. He was very pro-Trump and then suddenly became anti-Trump. What happened? He referred to Trump as, quote, the literal definition of patriotism on July 20th, 2019. He had several targeted threats against Democratic congressional representatives in the squad, hoping and wishing death. We don't need to read those things. But we want you dead. Said some very bad things. You can read them on your screen. But in the early 2020s, something happened. His ideology flipped 180 degrees, and he became very critical of Trump. Fox News and Republicans, and all are complaining about mail-in voting. There's the president just barely missing it, man. It's just a surreal scene. Watch it again. You're like, oh my gosh, we were so close. The first time he criticized Trump was on January 23rd, 2020. He commented on a video of a law professor, Jonathan Turley, talking about Trump's first impeachment. He said, hey, Turley, keep in mind the only reason we may know about any of this is because of Trump's stupidity. Started describing Trump supporters as a cult. He says, how can you people call others sheep, but you are too brainwashed to realize how dumb you are? I mean, literally, you guys sound like a cult sometimes. Also said Trump's a racist. By April 2020, constantly criticizing Trump in the pandemic response, saying he was too slow and everything he's doing now should have been done. So maybe COVID radicalized him. Through the summer of 20, Crooks' online rhetoric became increasingly radical and violent. Then he wrote in August, in my humble opinion, the only way to fight the government is with terrorism-style attacks. Sneak a bomb into a building, track down any important people, and try to take them out. Now, any sort of head-to-head fight is suicide, he said. So we need the war in the propaganda and information space. Also uncovered a bunch of accounts, PayPal. Rod Swanson is a former senior FBI agent who was the chief of investigations for the state of Nevada during the Las Vegas shooting. Rod Swanson, and I think, isn't Ron Swanson, he was also the other character in one of those Will Ferrell movies. He also previously served on FBI Director Robert Mueller's detail. Now, contacted by phone over the weekend, Swanson said he was surprised that his name was connected to Crooks. He said, I don't know anything about that kid or his family. I don't even use PayPal. I don't even know how to set up a PayPal account, said a former FBI agent. Former FBI, I don't know how to use PayPal. A computer, what's that? He said he retired from the FBI in 2016, and he went to work for Nevada AG, and now he works in oil and gas. This FBI agent. Okay, so furry fetish. Crooks was a furry? Just like that dude that Tyler Robinson was banging. But when told of Crooks's, when told of Crooks's online threats, he said there was no way the FBI would not be aware of the teenager. No matter how ridiculous the allegation, no matter if it's COVID or not, somebody's going to knock on somebody's door, said Swanson. If they investigated that kid, there's a record of it. And somebody would have responded to his threats. Now, like the alleged Charlie Kirk assassin, Tyler Robinson, Crook was also interested in furries and exploring gender identity. He described himself with the pronouns they, them on the platform DeviantArt, which is one of the biggest online hubs for furry art and the furry community. A furry is someone who has an interest in an anthropomorphized animal characters, often as a sexual fetish. And yeah, man, I've seen these freaks walking around in downtown Phoenix one time, and there were a bunch of them in their costumes walking each other on the streets of downtown Phoenix. So I had to leave immediately. 2 accounts linked to Crooks' primary email were found on DeviantArt under usernames Epic Microwave and the Epic Microwave. The account suggests he had an obsession with scantily clad cartoon characters sporting muscle-bound male bodies and female heads. Oh, gosh. Now, one of the people Crooks interacted with online was this guy called Willie Tepes, and Tucker had this all over his documentary. A member of Norwegian neo-Nazi group called the Nordic Resistance Movement, which has since been designated a terrorist organization by the State Department. He encouraged violence and Crooks' extremism, using a Maoist phrase, political power comes from the barrel of a gun. In another comment, Tepes said that he had been contacted by Russian and American intelligence. And yeah, people who ask you to contact them, they're feds. This is how they avoid entrapment. And so they're talking with each other. But here's a question from Miranda. Did his brush with the Norwegian and his own violent rhetoric win him a visit from the FBI or the Secret Service? Did they go check on him at all after he's threatening to murder people? If not, why not? If they did, why has this not been disclosed? Miranda Devine says the FBI refused to comment on this when asked on Sunday whether Crooks was ever investigated, because Cash would rather just go scream about how numbers. No, 5,000 this, 100% this, 25 million of these, whatever. What do you have as a result? Or are you just digging holes and then filling them up again? And whether there was an FBI file on Crooks before Butler, don't know. FBI also refused to comment. Why have you not been forthcoming on congressional oversight requests? Ray told Congress in 11 days after the shooting, he said the Bureau did not have any prior information about the shooter, and he was, quote, not in our holdings before the shooting. He said we ran a search and never found him. Susan Crabtree, the Secret Service whisperer over there at Real Clear Politics, has broken multiple stories on this, says her key Secret Service source from 2020 told me that Crooks was not a person of record in the Secret Service and wasn't known until Butler. Another photograph of this dude. Miranda says something doesn't add up. Yeah. Ray has been heavily criticized after Parkland because Cruz was on their radar. Was Ray trying to avoid for being blamed for another atrocity? Is that why he downplayed Trump's injury? Remember, he's like, it could have been shrapnel. If the Secret Service had been aware of this, wouldn't the Secret Service have gone over there? There's another gun. We don't know what happened because the Secret Service after action report is classified. The only bodies that could look at it are the intelligence committees in Congress, and they don't care. No curiosity out of them. A criminal investigation of a presidential assassination falls under the jurisdiction of the FBI, and Cash is too busy worried about his girlfriend. Johnson had to issue a subpoena in July on the first anniversary of the Butler attack and complained that he had been stonewalled by the FBI and the Secret Service. Yeah, of course, Ron has. Trump and those close to him are also skeptical of this story. Is it hard to believe the FBI or the Secret Service missed Crooks? I don't know, or kind of allowed him to exist. The question is, what did they do about him? And the answer is, maybe nothing. So good story over there from Miranda. And there were some interesting photos over here that are, kind of gruesome. I'll share them with you. This is a cartoon who's getting his head cracked open. But here are some of the screenshots from this dude. And, it's really a sad state. Like, honestly, look at this young kid. Probably a normal kid. He's got an American flag t-shirt on. And it's just like, he's dead. He's shooting at our presidential candidates. Our FBI's covering the whole thing up. I like to believe that humans start out naturally in a state of goodness and then they become corrupted and, evil acts upon them. And then they become perverted and sinful and evil in many ways, become much worse. But it's just a sad state. It's like, what the heck, man? What the heck happened here? What happened to this young smiling kid who loves America now trying to shoot Trump in the head? Like, what the hell happened here? It's just crazy. Then is it the trans? Is it the they, them? Like what turns these like nice kid? Hey, everybody, I'm happy. It's like 8th grade, 6th grade. Then he goes they, them. Then he gets into furries and then he starts shooting at presidential candidates. Like what is going on? So the Gateway Pundit, and this came over from Brianna Mello. You know who she is over at InfoWars. She's amazing. Tucker Carlson and Miranda published their investigative reports, but these are the screenshots, and I can see why Miranda didn't want to include them because they're pretty gruesome. But Brianna went through and got them. So that's Thomas Crooks. Here's one account over on DeviantArt, they, them. So you get transed up, you get furried up, and suddenly you become a political, adversary. This one, a secondary account has been deleted, but there were some images being posted, like this cartoon figure being cracked in the head, this other cartoon figure shooting and killing something. Crooks also operated a PayPal account, Rod Swanson, and a Google Play account called Epic Microwave. And here are some of the posts that he wrote. So who knows what ultimately happened, but we would like more answers than, one sentence would be nice. More than just one little sentence right here. Limited online presence. Okay. Thanks, Cash. Great job. Trump says more about all of this. Our FBI is a joke. It still is a joke until they show us differently. We still don't have answers on how many feds were in the crowd. Feds, not FBI. Federal agents, sources, federal adjacent to them, CHSs, informants, sources. I don't care. We want answers. Trump said it was just revealed the FBI had secretly placed against all rules, regulations, and protocols. He posted this one a while ago, so you've read that one. We've already read this. This is direct from Christopher Wray. We said, I think he reposted this today. 274 FBI agents into the crowd just prior to the January 6th hoax. This is different from what Christopher Wray stated. And Christopher Wray needs to be prosecuted as well. Trump posted this one in addition to reposting that other one. He said, Wray lied. We know that there were federal agents down there. And he posted this one today, bright and early this morning. And he shared this Chris Farley meme to Pam Bondi. He said, Christopher Wray testified before Congress that there were not agents in the crowd. We know that there were many of them in the crowd. And we don't trust their numbers on what they qualify as somebody who was from the FBI in the crowd. But then Chris Farley comes out and he says, Pam Bondi, for the love of God, just arrest somebody, screaming it in only the way Chris Farley can. So Kash Patel came out. He was on with Maria Bartiromo, and he said, well, there's going to be accountability. There are criminal referrals that are being opened, and we're going to get to the bottom of this. And I'll probably give you more information that's not just a one sentence that is a failing grade in English class.
Accountability director. And I know that there's a limited amount you can say about this with regard to what happens next. There was a criminal referral for John Brennan. Do you believe we will see accountability?
Yes, 100%. We are delivering this accountability. But I'd just like to remind the audience, and I think you know this better than anyone, they built this weaponization scheme over the course of a decade plus. Yeah. In these first 8 months that we've been there, we've already charged individuals, thanks to this great Department of Justice, who are at the pinnacle of this weaponization of government. We've already turned over, by the way, Maria, James Comey turned over 3,000 documents to Congress for oversight. Christopher Wray turned over 13,000. This FBI, under our leadership, has turned over 38,000 pages of information to Congress for congressional oversight purposes, which is wed to accountability, which is wed to the referrals that they send us back that we activate at the FBI. Every single letter they send us that has a substantive referral is opened by this FBI.
Director, accountability.
All right. So that sounds good. We'll see. But I would like to see results on some of these key issues. I appreciate the numbers. I know we can be a little bit, aggressive, and we're like, well, 1,000 arrests, 50,000, kilograms of whatever, blah, blah, blah. A lot of that is just standard operating procedure. The FBI should be doing those things. No question about it. And we're glad when they do a good job on those things. But what this administration was elected to do was to fix the weaponization. And that means we need justice for a lot of these loose ends that need to be rectified, lest we have further perversions of our entities. We want answers on J6. We want answers on Butler. We want answers on it all. And we're going to keep putting pressure on them until we get it. But Cash is saying it's going to come soon, so we'll keep our eye on it. Thank you for joining us and subscribing as we do. All right, now, my friends, one final update on the day. And then it's time to hear from you. Can't wait to do that. But here is this one. Democrats caught red-handed spreading hoaxes about Epstein. We've already seen this before. And now the Oversight Committee is chronicling it in a beautiful thread where they are showing just how big of liars the Democrats really are. And you may have seen this one already, but they deleted this ridiculous post. They said, "New from the Democrats. Documents show that Trump spent Thanksgiving with Epstein in 2017. At the time, Trump was already president and Epstein was already a convicted offender." You go, okay. So since he was the president and everybody knows where the president is at every single minute, you can prove that somewhere, right? Well, they couldn't because it's not true. So they had to come out and delete this entire post. And it's just one of many. They just came out swinging because they have nothing else to talk about. Their policies are terrible. Their biggest star is a communist called Mamdani. They just got crushed in the shutdown. And so it's all Epstein all the time. But now Trump is also saying, release the files already. All right. I know we said we were going to release them and then not release them. Well, now we're back to releasing them again. And we just got over our whiplash from not releasing them. And so now we're back in releasing them again. It's like, and, you know, all right, it's what it is. So we're happy that we're getting some progress on this. Of course, the criticism about this post is that the president is just trying to get ahead of a bad vote that's not going to go his way. But the president did say that. He said, as I said on Friday night, aboard Air Force One to the fake news media, House Republicans should, I had to read this like 3 times, should, like what? Vote to release the Epstein files because we have nothing to hide. And it's time to move on from this Democrat hoax perpetrated by radical left lunatics in order to deflect from the great success of the Republican Party, including our recent victory on the Democrat shutdown. The Department of Justice has already turned over tens of thousands of pages to the public on, quote, Epstein, are looking at various Democrat operatives, Bill Clinton, Reid Hoffman, Larry Summers, etc., and their relationship to Epstein, and the House Oversight Committee can have whatever they are legally entitled to. I don't care. All I do care about is that Republicans get back on point, which is the economy, affordability, where we are winning big. Our victory on reducing inflation from the highest level in history to practically nothing, bringing down prices for the American people, delivering historic tax cuts, gaining trillions of dollars of investment into America, a record, the rebuilding of our military, securing our border, deporting criminal illegal aliens, ending men and women's sports, stopping transgender for everyone, and so much more. Nobody cared about Jeffrey Epstein when he was alive, and if the Democrats had anything, they would have had released it before our landslide election victory, which I think is true. Some members of the Republican Party are being used, and we can't let that happen. Let's start talking about the Republican Party's record-setting achievements and do not fall into the Epstein trap, which is actually a curse on the Democrats, not us. Make America great again. And we always thought this was the right approach in general. We've made the argument many times. I think if they had something, they would have used it because they didn't have anything and they made up crimes. Russia collusion after 16. And then in 2024, 4 criminal indictments. They had to go manufacture charges in all these places. So if they would have just had a nice, criminal case on a silver platter here, I think they would have used it. But now Trump is saying, okay, release it. And, you know, the cynical perspective on this is they should have just come out at the beginning and done that from the beginning. And if there is anything damning in there, you just release it. Okay. Saying you don't have anything and you're not going to release anything makes everybody demand you release something. If you were to just release something, and even if you were just, selective about it, just all the bad stuff for Democrats. Notice what we have. Notice what we have. Well, we're finding more things. We're doing an investigation. And you just, burn that out over 4 years. Slow drip of all the bad things for them. And you're the good guy. And you're using it to your advantage, which I think would have been the more appropriate play. But, Trump didn't want to go that route for whatever reason. But here we are. So that was posted by the president, and the Democrats are now deleting their hoax scam on this thing. And I think that they're going to be in for a big reckoning and an awakening because Clinton all over the files, Reid Hoffman, many, many mentions. And now the Oversight Committee is showing how desperate they are. They come out, they try to smear the right, and they fail. says Democrats got caught red-handed spreading a hoax about Trump and Epstein. They misled the public, lied about witness testimony, doctored documents, and are now scrambling to cover it up. We have the receipts that they don't want you to read. Here they are. Let's start with the former AG called Bill Barr. We know him. Democrats claim that Barr, quote, could not clear Trump of wrongdoing after his deposition. What? But what did Barr actually say? This: there was no evidence. And if the Southern District of New York had anything on Trump, they would have indicted him. They didn't. On August 18, 2025, the Oversight Committee conducted a deposition with Bill Barr, former U.S. Attorney General under Trump. During his depo, Barr was asked about the following by Jasmine Crockett from Texas. All right, so just add a little accent to this. And you have no direct knowledge of any of the now young women or women that claim that they had encounters with the president through Epstein, correct? So we have to understand what she's... I never was told by the Southern District that they had evidence to support any claim like that. Then another staffer asked this question. Okay, Bill. Okay, so in your experience, you have no doubt if Southern District of New York prosecutors saw evidence of a crime, they would have followed that evidence, right? And if it led to an indictment, they would have indicted. And if it led to a conviction, they would have followed the facts where they led. Is that fair? Yes, for that group. I also feel, that they would have done the same for Clinton, I believe. Bill says, I think, remember this stuff also went on under Biden's administration, and they were looking for something to bring against Trump. And this was, if they had evidence, this would have been low-hanging fruit. I was never informed of the evidence, and I'm skeptical there is any. From Bill Barr, yeah. Then Alexander Acosta. Remember, he was the first prosecutor that gave Epstein that sweetheart deal. They tried to smear Trump by linking him to Epstein in the 2007 case. But Acosta, the prosecutor, came in and crushed their whole narrative. He testified that he never spoke, emailed, or had any contact with Trump about Epstein. Ever. None. Robert Garcia says, all right, Alexander. So you never, the entire time you were U.S. attorney, you never once spoke to Donald Trump? The entire time. Let me be more clear. I did not speak with President Trump, with Donald Trump, before I was considered for Secretary of Labor. You never had a phone conversation? Also, not just a meeting, never a phone any kind of conversation with Donald Trump before? I did not have an in-person conversation. I did not have a phone conversation. Email? We hadn't shaken hands. What about any of his associates? Email, text, any of that? He says no email to my recollection, no text to my recollection, no associates to my recollection. He moved in circles that I did not move in, to be honest, which in it of itself is kind of crazy. Like Trump didn't even know anything about his Secretary of Labor. Did the FBI interview Trump or speak with him with regards to this case? Alexander, I have again. I did not direct the investigation. If our prosecutors thought they should pursue that lead, they were free to pursue that lead. If a prosecutor thought, but it is possible that they did based on their relationship. I have no knowledge that any person spoke to Donald Trump with respect to Epstein. I have no knowledge of Donald Trump's name appearing in any Epstein document. I have no knowledge of Donald Trump being associated with the Epstein investigation in any way. I am not saying that it wasn't, because I can't speak on behalf of the many, many attorneys and case agents involved. I can simply say that I have no knowledge of that. And let me also say, I think if there was, I think it's pretty spectacular it hasn't leaked by now, but that's just speculation. Yeah. It's pretty good speculation. What do you think? So what did the Democrats do? Well, they leaked 3 cherry-picked emails out of 23,000 pages, and they made their own redactions to hide the facts. One name they blacked out, Virginia Giuffre. Why? Because she publicly said she never saw Trump do anything wrong. And we covered this email at length, but you can see what the Democrats did here. They just redacted it. That's her name from the email. Let's see if we can zoom in on this a little bit and get in there. Yeah. I want you to realize that the dog that hasn't barked is Trump. This victim, this is what the Democrats posted, spent hours at my house with him. He has never once been mentioned, the police chief and more. The name was Virginia, and she wrote a book and was unequivocal. Trump did nothing wrong. But another Democrat redaction for their hoax, who was this? Oh yeah, Prince Andrew. They hid that one. Why? Because the redacted context changes the email. They were fabricating a smear campaign. They were not telling the truth. This name was redacted right here. The Democrat said, victim Mar-a-Lago, blank, blank, blank. Trump said he asked me to resign. Never a member ever. Of course, he knew about the girls as he asked Ghislaine to stop. It's like, wow, that's very nice of Trump to do that. Ghislaine, I know you're stealing our people. I know that Epstein's a pervert. Please stop doing it. The email was about this. Virginia worked at Mar-a-Lago. She was the one that accused Prince Andrew. It was Virginia who says that she was, attacked by Prince Andrew, and he basically resigned all of his titles and more, because it's probably true. Then they lied about who did the redactions. Remember this? The Republicans redacted these things. No, they didn't. You guys did. Because you know that if you can fact check your stupid claims, everyone will know you're liars. Crockett and others went on CNN pretending they had no idea who made the edits. CNN corrected them live. Here's this clip of Jasmine. You can watch CNN explain.
This is an email from April 2nd, 2011. Republicans are saying that victim is Virginia Giuffre. As you know, she died by suicide. She's been very outspoken victim of Jeffrey Epstein. Here's the email right here on your screen. She wrote a book, as you know, and she did not accuse him of any wrongdoing. What do you make of that? And can you confirm that?
Yeah, I don't know. Obviously, it's redacted who the victim is, so I won't necessarily take the Republicans' word on who it is.
You can look at the documents that they also released that you guys got originals of.
That's redacted, and I don't know why they would necessarily redact someone's name who is deceased at this point.
The Democrats did that, though. The Democrats redacted.
No, I understand,
Okay,
but I'm just saying, our biggest concern is to actually make sure that we are protecting victims, and obviously she wrote a book, she told her truth.
Yeah, so she told her truth, and the truth did not implicate Trump in any way. And the Democrats redacted it. Why? You don't have to take the Republicans' word for it. The Democrats redacted it. The reason being they wanted to cover up the truth. And it looks a lot worse if you can hide the truth. Yeah, when I first saw that hairdo, it reminded me of that creature from The Fifth Element. Remember that opera singer? Which maybe is what she's going for. She's nailing it. We released everything. 23,000 pages. Suddenly the Democrats who spent months screaming, release the files, now said, you released too many files. This is disorienting to us. This is distracting for our brains. The sheer volume is disorienting us. Then the fake and dishonest New York Times quietly edited their piece. They removed the word disorient from the page. They're literally helping the Democrats rewrite history after their hoax fell apart. They then changed it. It was intended to disorient, because they can't read that many documents. It's too much for the little pea brains. And to distract attention from their revelations. They just changed it. It's not some Democrats. We're not disoriented. Change that right now. Oversight Committee says, but here's something no one is talking about. In 2019, Stacey Plaskett was texting with Epstein during an actual House hearing. And we released a video on this one and talked about this on a Memo stream. We'll play it again. But Epstein helped Plaskett question a discredited witness who hated Trump. This should be the biggest story in the whole country. The fact that our congresspeople are like little puppets who have some, weird perverts sending them text messages, operating them like a little doll. It's really sick. We should be able to see who these people are texting with, but we'll never see that, of course. Here's this ridiculous exchange. Washington Post did the matchup on this, and this was epic.
Obama was president of...
Hey, message from Epstein over to Stacey Plaskett. Are you chewing? I want you to be polite when you're representing me in Congress.
The United States. And while
she looks
we were
down,
driving through a struggling neighborhood in Chicago,
not anymore.
He commented
742.
that only black people could live that way.
Michael Cohen is testifying. Michael Cohen is coming after Trump, the same guy who testified against Trump in his false business records, fake prosecution. He's now there, and Epstein is communicating with Plaskett. Not anymore. Sorry about that. I'm not chewing. I don't want to embarrass you, Jeffrey.
Attorney-client privilege, yes, I will turn it over.
Message. Cohen brought up Rona. She is a keeper of the secrets. Epstein says that to Stacey. Rona, keeper of the secrets.
My friend Mr. Meadows pointed out, misled this committee even today in a written submission that contradicted your testimony. You have suggested you are going to review that.
Rona?
Are you going to review it in our next break?
Who's
to
Rona?
correct the record, yes or no?
Yes.
Quick,
Question,
Jeffrey,
you
I'm
helped
up
out the
next. Is that an
president's
acronym?
campaign,
Jeffrey,
or were
quick.
involved in the campaign as a representative, as a spokesman, even in your words today.
That's
it's
his
your
assistant.
idea for the campaign dating back to 2011. Is that accurate, yes or no?
Yes.
Mr. Weisenberg and other individuals, Ms. Rona. Who are those individuals? Are they with the Trump organization?
They
and
are.
Are there other people that we should be meeting with?
So Alan Weisselberg is the chief financial officer.
Uh-huh.
The
You got to
Trump
quickly give us
organization.
as many names as you can so we can get to them.
Yes, ma'am.
As Ms. Rona, what is Ms. Rona's position?
Rona Graff is Mr. Trump's executive assistant.
And would she be able to corroborate many of the statements that you've made here?
Yes, her office is directly next to his, and she's involved in a lot.
Good work.
That went on.
Good work from Jeffrey. Nice work. I own you. I control your slot in Congress. Stop chewing in Congress, or I will not support you anymore. She's like, yes, sir. Sorry. It's insane that this is happening. Who else is sending text messages in to our Congress people? I remember a quote from some robber baron back during the early days. They said, Rockefeller. They said, Vanderbilt, you should run for Senate. He said, why would I run for Senate? I have the best senators money can buy. Don't need to run. I already own it. It is this exactly. And they're sending text messages. I don't care who they're sending text messages with. Is it Bezos? Is it Zuckerberg? I don't care. This one was pervert Epstein. It should all be problematic. You should do your homework and come into class and not get a helpline from anybody when you're in Congress. Do your job. And this was after Epstein was already convicted. This is in 2019. He hadn't been arrested yet the second time. And she's texting with a convicted offender. So pretty disgusting behavior. The media, of course, covering that up. Stacey Plaskett should explain herself. Why was she taking instructions from Epstein? And what other times was she taking instructions from Epstein? And what other Congress people were texting with Epstein? That should be a huge part of this probe as well. How much of this was going on? Maybe that's why huge swaths of the government are not interested in releasing the files, because they're in them. Anna Paulina Luna said, like I said before, this is good. We need to release these things. Trump has zero to hide, and some have used this whole thing in an effort to smear the president, which is incredibly sad because the victims deserve justice. The truth always comes out. I look forward to our continued investigations into this on Oversight. From Anna Paulina Luna, which we hope is true. Now, Thomas Massie, this is an older clip from when Cash was out. But now this is, I think, becoming more and more relevant. Thomas Massie goes through a whole list of people that might be implicated in this thing. Let's see what he said and what Kash Patel had to say in response.
Director Patel, I watched some of your Senate hearing yesterday when Senator Kennedy asked you, you've seen most of the files, who, if anyone, did Epstein traffic these women to besides himself? You replied, according to the transcript, there is no credible information that he trafficked them to anyone else. You also said somewhere in the hearing and here today that the problem is that the case files are constrained by limited search warrants from 2006 to 2007 and that the non-prosecution agreement hamstrung future investigations. Those constraints only apply to the Southern District of Florida. They do not apply to the Southern District of New York, the location of the 2019 sex trafficking indictment, which produced many things, including a series of FD 302 documents. According to victims who cooperated with the FBI in that investigation, these documents in FBI possession, your possession, detail at least 20 men, including Mr. Jess Staley, CEO of Barclays Bank, who Jeffrey Epstein trafficked victims to, victims including minors, such as Virginia Roberts Giuffre, may she rest in peace. That list also includes at least 19 other individuals, one Hollywood producer worth a few $100 million, one royal prince, one high-profile individual in the music industry, one very prominent banker, one high-profile government official, one high-profile former politician, one owner of a car company in Italy, one rock star, one magician, at least 6 billionaires, including a billionaire from Canada. We know these people exist in the FBI files, the files that you control. I don't know exactly who they are, but the FBI does. Have you launched any investigations into any of these people, and have you seen these 302 documents?
Sir, I have asked my FBI agents to review the entirety of the Epstein files and bring forth any credible information. And we're working with Congress not only to divulge that information and produce it to you, but any investigations that arise from any credible investigation will be brought. There have been no new materials brought to me launching a new indictment.
So is the loophole here, or is it your assertion that these victims aren't credible, that the 302s maybe didn't produce credible statements that rise to a probable cause?
It's not my assertion, sir. It's the assertion of two different United States attorneys' offices from 3 separate administrations who investigated those same materials in lifetime.
Are the 302 documents in the FBI's possession?
They reviewed all that, yes, sir.
And so have you reviewed those 302 documents where the victims name the people who victimized them?
If I personally know, but the FBI has.
Yeah. So how can you sit here and in front of the Senate and say there are no names?
I said
I named one today.
I said we are not in the practice at the Department of Justice FBI of releasing victims' names. That is not what we do. We are also not in the habit of releasing incredible information. That's not what we do. But multiple authorities have looked at the entirety of what we have.
Okay, I got to move on here. Were you present?
Yeah. So, all right. So some names being floated around out there. And of course, you don't want innocent people to have their names released and to be skewered in the court of public opinion. But you also don't want criminals roaming around because your government is complicit in covering up their criminality. Now, here's more. Schumer got asked about this today. You know, you guys had 4 years to release all this stuff. If you thought there was something damning in there for the president, why didn't you release it, Chuck?
Just, I guess, a question that's out there. Why wouldn't they have been released the last 4 years when President Biden was in office?
Well, that's the question every American is asking. Or not every American, but so many Americans are asking. What the hell is he hiding? Why doesn't he want them released? When you don't want something like that...
That's not the question. The question was, why didn't you release it? Trump wasn't hiding anything when Biden was in charge there, Chucky.
Released when even a whole lot of Republicans are calling for the release, his own party members, people ask the question, what's he hiding? It's got to be answered by releasing the files.
Well, he just said, release the files. And so we're looking forward to that, Chuck. You should be happy about that, too. Mike Johnson was caught in the halls by Manu Raju over in the halls of Congress today. News just spoke with Johnson on the Epstein bill and Marjorie. Asked him if he's going to support the bill that he's been seen as trying to kill. He says, I was never trying to kill this bill. We just didn't like the mechanism by which it was being requested. Here is Mike Johnson.
I also believe that it's entirely a moot point because, as you know, the Oversight Committee is doing all their deliberate work. So
you talked to the president. Do you advise him to get behind it?
He and I talked about it quite a bit, but I'm not going to get into the content of what we said. But his statements speak for themselves, and he has nothing. He's never had anything to hide. He and I had the same concern that we wanted to ensure that victims of these heinous crimes are completely protected from disclosure. Those who don't want their names to be out there. And I'm not sure the discharge does that, and that's part of the problem.
The president has called Prosecutorial a traitor. She says that it's impacting her security and safety. Would you advise the president to stop calling her a traitor?
I don't. Look, it's not surprising that the president was frustrated.
It's not surprising the president is frustrated. Yeah, that's a true statement. Well done, Mike. So here's more from the president himself. He was in the Oval Office today talking about FIFA and some other things and was asked about the Epstein files. And Trump's voice is a little bit shot. Sounds like he was screaming at somebody this morning over a trade deal or something like that. But here is the president on the Epstein files.
Here's what I want. We have nothing to do with Epstein. The Democrats do. all of his friends were Democrats. You look at this Reid Hoffman, you look at Larry Summers, Bill Clinton, they went to his island all the time, and many others, they're all Democrats. All I want for people to recognize a great job that I've done on pricing, on affordability, because we brought prices way down, but they're going way lower, on energy, on ending 8 wars and another one coming pretty soon, I believe. We've done a great job. And I hate to see that deflect from the great job we've done. So I'm all for it. You know, we've already given 50,000 pages. You do know that. Unfortunately, like with the Kennedy situation, with the Martin Luther King situation, not to put Jeffrey Epstein in the same category, but no matter what we give, it's never enough. You know, with Kennedy, we gave everything and it wasn't enough. With Martin Luther King, we gave everything and it's never enough. We've already given, I believe the number is 50,000 pages, 50,000 pages. And it's just a Russia hoax as it pertains to the Republicans. Now, I believe that many of the people some of the people that we mentioned are being looked at very seriously for their relationship to Jeffrey Epstein. But they were with him all the time. I wasn't at all. And we'll see what happens. What I just don't want Epstein to do is detract from the great success of the Republican Party, including the fact that the Democrats are totally blamed for the shutdown. You know, they cost our country hundreds of billions of dollars with that, at a lot of inconvenience. So I'm for I don't. They can do whatever they want. We'll give them everything. Sure, I would. Let the Senate look at it. Let anybody look at it. But don't talk about it too much, because honestly, I don't want to take it away from us. It's really a Democrat problem. The Democrats were Epstein's friends, all of them.
It's true.
And it's a hoax. The whole thing is a hoax. And I don't want to take it away from really the greatness of what the Republican Party has accomplished over the last period of time.
Yeah, and it makes sense to me. The Democrats steal elections. They blame the Republicans. The Democrats, break everything. They break healthcare. They blame the Republicans. They break housing. They blame the Republicans. They invade our country. They blame the Republicans. Nonstop. Hillary talks about Trump colluding with the Russians. Turns out she's colluding with the FBI in order to rig elections. So we get it. It's nonstop. And the Epstein stuff, I think we've got good indicators that Trump is exactly right. 2 little simple hints on this one are Catherine Rumler was texting and emailing with Jeffrey Epstein about talking to the boss. Who was the boss? Barack Obama. How about that? Stacey Plaskett texting with Epstein in the middle of an active congressional proceeding. The Republicans, if they were smart, they would race into this. They would form a committee. They would investigate all of the communications between Democrat constituents, Democrat candidates, and Epstein. Any politicians who are in the middle of a congressional session, have some rules of order in your own house and figure out who is talking with this dude and getting instructions on running Congress from Epstein. It's pretty sick behavior, but Trump is now saying, release the files, something we've been in favor of this whole time. So that's great. We were already told they were going to release the files a long time ago. So better late than never, as they say. So we're going to keep our eye on this one, but the Democrats, I think, are probably going to regret this. The more of this stuff that goes on, the more Obama connections, Larry Summer connections, other Democrats emailing him about having to pee at pit stops and how much they hate fat people, whatever. We'll keep our eye on this one, my friends. Thank you for subscribing and joining as we do. All right, my friends, if you're just joining us, quick recap on what we talked about, then we'll hear from you. Thank you for being here. Thanks for being membos. Thanks for sending these donos in. We had some good stuff. One reminder, prayers up for our friend Nate the lawyer. Having surgery in a couple days. Prayers up for Nate. Thank you for sending those in as well. We also then talked about the James Comey case. An emergency motion got filed. Lindsay Halligan and the DOJ up against a very obstinate judge. This guy, Fitzpatrick, is now doing everything he can to try to create an opening for James Comey to dismiss his case. And you can see what they're trying to engineer. Meanwhile, we got Todd Blanch talking about his faith in Lindsay Halligan, who's doing a great job out there, one of few prosecutors doing a good job. Then we turned our attention to Thomas Matthew Crooks, who apparently uses they, them pronouns and is a furry. And we're all trying to understand how a young man who looks like this, wearing an American flag t-shirt, becomes radicalized to the point where he just gets a gun and tries to shoot and kill people. Is it a progression from normal young kid into they, them, which then turns into an assassination attempt and a love of furries? Strange behavior, of course, a terrible thing. Hopefully we can stop that from happening. We're all asking ourselves, Pam Bondi, for the love of God, just arrest somebody, please, and we'll be happier about it. We got more from Kash Patel. We gave this tweet an F because it's really duplicative. It's very distracting with all these numbers and 1,000 interviews, 500,000 digital. Okay, blah, 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 blah. Do you have answers? Yes or no? Don't really care if you're driving around in circles all day. If you don't make the delivery, it doesn't do anything other than cost us gas. So this is the one-word response that we got. Fortunately, we have actual investigators like Tucker Carlson and Miranda Devine who can dig into these things and bring us some stories that are truthful. We're happy about that. So Kash is out saying, hold tight, we're going to get you some info. Okay, so that's happening. We've also got the Democrat hoax being obliterated, and we didn't even finish that thread, but you get the point of it. Lots of scams over there. The president now saying, release the files. And so we'll see what the House does. Coming up soon, Thomas Massie asking Kash Patel some questions. Chuck Schumer not answering the questions that he's asked. And Mike Johnson, of course, responding as well before we heard from President Trump. Lindsay Halligan won the stay. That's tremendous news. And that's great news. Yeah, that's great news. And so we kind of expected that maybe Fitzpatrick would get stayed again. Let me see if I can find that real quick. That's great news. Thank you for that. Not a real friendly comment, but but thank you for the heads up anyways. We appreciate it. Let's see what we got. It's not on our docket just yet. So that's good news. Mike Davis just posted that. Let's see. So the judge stayed it. Do you think the records were transferred or opened up before then? Let's see. Let's see if we can find Mike Davis in the House. See what we got over here. Dun, 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 dun. Here it is. Mike Davis. Just moments ago, 447. Says Trump U.S. attorney wins a temporary stay of the insane order that we just read. And so fresh on the docket. This matter comes before the court, granted in part, ordered the government will file any objections to Fitzpatrick's order by Wednesday. Thereafter, otherwise, the order is stayed pending the resolution. Yeah. Now, again, it's like this, like these judges are, this is a good decision and the right decision because that judge's decision is crazy. And the rules say, right, that you get the 14 days to lodge your objections and brief your case. So this judge, I mean, Fitzpatrick, this is twice now that he's made decisions and had to stay them. So that's great, but you can see what we're dealing with. So Mike Davis, thanks for flagging that. Commenter, thank you for that. We appreciate it as well. Thanks for flagging it for us. But now, my friends, it is time to hear from you and to see what you have to say about all this. Very much appreciate you being here. Thank you for the donos and for supporting our work and for being here. You're amazing. Let's see what we got. A couple of comments that came in. And yeah, here's one. Oh, is this a new book from James Comey? How I Helped Destroy the FBI, written by James Comey. Deep State Are Us. The name of the book is called No Loyalty, More Lies to America, written and published by Swamp Publications. Definitely don't buy it, but it looks good. Ravicus says, posted in the comment section about Project Veritas. They're reporting on it right now. And says, more on the debacle in North Dakota. Man, not familiar with this story. The Dunsith debacle. And it looks like Project Veritas is over there talking about government cover-ups, investigative journalists, and more. Man, Ravicus, thank you for that. Looks like a great story. Shout out to our friends at Project Veritas. Thanks for flagging that for us. Look at that. Good stuff. Thank you for that. The Bronx says, I'm sorry, but Bondi is a liability. She doesn't dot her I's and cross her T's. It's just sloppy work. And, you know, I hope that she has the right people in the right seats. And it's like, if Halligan hadn't been there, we would have lost the Comey prosecution. Just because the wrong person was in the wrong seat. So we hope that is resolved. Here's a link from Milan about Mom Donnie. Amazing, Milan. Thanks for sharing that link with us. Tony D, did someone say furry? Oh, is that where this all started? With John Candy in that movie? Spaceballs? Pretty sure. Wasn't he supposed to be like the Wookiee or something? Yeah. So John Candy started it all. Now we have political assassinations. Great. Not a QAnon says, the AI overview says that inadvertent or voluntary disclosure can breach attorney-client privilege as well as the crime fraud exception. So isn't leaking the contents to the media the same as voluntary disclosure? Yeah, I mean, I think you could make that argument, and a judge could certainly do that. Why should it be protected? If Comey is in the middle of committing a crime and that the content of that info was leaked, you could say that the emails were in furtherance of that crime, and so there's no privilege around them, and they should be accessible. If Trump was the defendant, that's exactly what they would say, and none of that material would be released. The point is that the lower, even if it stayed, like the fact that the lower level judge is trying this stuff just shows you how bad it is. Fitzpatrick should be removed. This higher level judge, the district judge, already stayed him once and then stayed him again. So, okay, you're terrible at your job, so just stop it. Jay Marino, Richmond was hired by Comey as a special government employee. How exactly is he Comey's personal attorney at the same time? Comey gets attorney-client privilege for FBI communications. The hack ruling is based on the judge's attorney-client privilege legal alchemy. When will the Supremes put an end to it? Well, they're not on deck yet. The higher level judge issued a stay, and we're happy to see that. Yeah, Doan, Barr's suspected of instructing Alex Acosta's line of questioning in the Epstein, Florida case, i.e. being an asset, being a backdoor. Yeah, there are weird questions with Bill Barr. Like, I think his dad, like, wrote a weird book about, like, space aliens and, like, 12-year-olds or something. Bill Barr's dad. And then they worked at, like, the same school, may have helped Epstein get a position. Weird. And then Barr came out, and he's like, it's suicide. It's suicide. Like, you didn't even, it's suicide. I'm Bill Barr. It's suicide. We're like, all right. Kind of like Dan and Cash. He killed himself. What? He killed himself. Okay. America Rising Media. Welcome aboard, American Rising Media. What a joy it is to have you. Thank you for rating our stream. We're grateful. Jigum, this behavior was the crux of the message behind the movie. Oh, look at that nice photo of me and my beautiful wife. My beautiful wife and I. The Goveas go to Washington. It's true. We had a very interesting conversation on our members only stream about a big move that may or may not be happening soon. That's us. That's how when we dress up, that's exactly how we look. Jigum, you nailed it. Thank you for that. A Spotlight Lawyer picture. Sounds like it's going to be a great movie, a great film. Yeah, so that's a lot of fun. Says the behavior was the crux of the message behind the movies. Go get him, Goveas. Thank you, Jigum. Super fun. Thanks for sharing that. I'll definitely save that and send that to my beautiful bride. The Rubos. Personally, we would love to see the United Nations disbanded and removed from U.S. soil. But congratulations, President Trump. God bless you and Godspeed. Yeah, look at this. Congratulations to the world on the incredible vote of the United Nations Security Council just moments ago, acknowledging and endorsing the Board of Peace, which will be chaired by me and include the most powerful and respected leaders throughout the world. This will go down as one of the biggest approvals in the history of the UN. Further peace all over the world. Thank you to the UN, all the countries, and everybody. Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and many others. Turkey, Jordan, Indonesia, all the others. Let's see. China, Russia, France, UK, Algeria, Denmark, Greece, Guyana, South Korea, Pakistan, Panama, Sierra Leone, Slovenia, Somalia. Qatar, Egypt, UAE, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, Turkey, and Jordan. That's interesting. Yeah, Russia's not on that list. Some others, Israel's not on that list. China's not on that list. China is on that list. Huh. All right. Very interesting. All right. So thank you for that. From the Rubos, Jonah Finn says, we need Epstein's grand jury and trial transcripts. Well, so for Epstein, there was no trial. He's dead. And the grand jury records, I think you could make an argument for releasing those, just like we released the Julius and Ethel Rosenberg transcripts when they were executed for treason. But we've got those records like way later, like decades later. So Epstein, you might say there's a public interest exception for releasing those documents, but not anytime soon. Sharpie guy, heartbroken, Rob. Oh, man. Cash is a psyop, and a year ago, I'd have hung my hat on him. Well, we were all hopeful. Don't get deflated. It's still the first quarter, okay? Sometimes you put in, a running back, and it takes a little while for him to get his legs under him. So we'll see what happens. So absolutely tired and worried for my grandchildren and the future for America. Pretty sure you have covered it all today, but anything to add, brother? It's hard to hang on to hope sometimes. Well, yeah, again, so Sharpie guy, yeah, I agree. It can be frustrating, but like, for example, we just had the Comey emergency just got stayed. So good news on that. We're getting some exposure on Crooks. Cash is getting a lot of feedback. So he's, doing some stuff now. He's going on the media. So stay positive. We're staying positive. We're not giving up. We got, we're on this boat and we're going to offer constructive criticism and hope, our team rises to the occasion. And I still have faith that they can. And in many cases are. E. Texley, what's up, Rob? Is there anything further that can be done to force the Tyler Robinson judge to require personal appearances by Robinson? At this point, my trust is so low that I'm wondering if Robinson is receiving plastic surgery and apt to be disappeared. Tinfoil hat. Yeah, E. Texley. Gosh, not if the prosecution's not that interested in it. Both sides are agreeing to waive their in-person appearances and appear telephonically. So, if they're both in agreement, it's supposed to be an adversarial system where you don't play patty cake with each other. Adversarial. It's how the system works. But anyways, so they didn't, of course, send in any opposition. Defense attorneys want to limit the media from being there. And the prosecutor's like, yeah, why not? Sure. So it's not good. Yeah, it's not good. E. Texley. Aaron. Hey, I wasn't being critical, Rob. I was just saying I wanted to relay some good news. Thank you, Aaron. I'm a little sensitive, I'm a little sensitive sometimes. So thank you for correcting it. Thank you for the heads up. I meant that genuinely. Even if I thought you were talking crap on me. I still appreciate the heads up. I'm like, that's a great, the dude's not happy with something, but at least he flagged a new story for us. So thank you for that, Aaron. But I appreciate it, man. I just get a little sensitive sometimes, What's up? Tony D. Space Relations. Oh, I better double check this one. Space Relations by Donald Barr. Oh, that's the book. Yeah, that's Bill Barr's dad's book. It's the weirdest thing. Yeah, here, Space Relations. I'm going to Google this. I'm not really happy about it, but Donald Barr. Yeah. Bill Barr's father wrote a novel like this. It's the weirdest thing. And then had close proximity to Epstein. Craig, who is campaigning to bring Kosar. Then, while en route, Kosar, one of the pirates, awakened Craig and other prisoners to R. It's all fiction. A 15-year-old virginal red-headed captive female in front of him. Then the fellow rapist pirates hear of this and dock the pay for spoiling her market value. Then spends it as a slave in engaging in... That's Bill Barr's dad. So, and I know a lot of people are like, well, it's just fiction and explore your creative side. How about without those themes in them? And then people want to accuse you of being in a conspiracy theory. Yeah, so gross. Yeah, Bill Barr's dad. Anyways, so my friends, thank you for those donos. Thank you for sending those in and for being here. Very grateful to have you. It has been a beautiful stream. Members, it's members only time, baby. Stick around. We're going to hang out, debrief for a little bit, see what else you thought about the show, and then call it a day. Pam says, we can't have such high expectations. Of this administration, we cut off our nose to spite our face. For example, I have a theory on the 600K Chinese students. What if that is to keep 600K American students from getting brainwashed in communism, while the CCP won't care and supplement our other American students and adding 1 million real world interns? Well, Pam, I think, first of all, I think that we can have constructive criticism, right? So criticizing our own side is not like abandoning the ship. And having questions about cash, having questions about the DOJ, the FBI, it's all out of love. It's like brotherly love, okay? It's like you can be on the same team and still talk crap against each other. But at the end of the day, you're both celebrating in victories together, right? And that's, I feel like a lot of people maybe don't understand that dynamic of politics. And it's just like everything is just so personal all the time. If you say anything bad, it's like you hate me. It's like, it's just, we want you to succeed. We want our team to win, but we also don't want to just be cheerleaders. Like we want to actually add value to the conversation. And hopefully by, talking about these things, we can flesh out the ideas and the best ideas can reach up to the top and the pressure can create the outcomes that we want. So of course, great comments, Pam. And I think Trump might agree with you, right? He sees some economic benefits to it, but again, you don't know why. Like other people are speculating maybe he needed the 600K in order to buy TikTok. Like these are just negotiated terms, right? But I agree. I think that there's a higher chance of impacting policy and, having a course correction from inside the tent than from outside the tent, generally. Rock Candy, what's up, Rock Candy? Thank you for bringing 5 new membos in. Amazing to have you. Amazing to have you here. Just me again and again. Slidey Pie is here. Marley's here. Wrath Ends and Love Legos, all gifted membos over on Rumble. Man, that's awesome. Welcome aboard. Rock Candy, thank you for supporting us. Great to have membos over there. Tony Hey Munkets, hey, just a heads up, I'm going to need a 3-year badge pretty soon. Maybe you could get Rhonda on that. Do we cap out at 2 years? I thought we had like 3 and up. Do we have more? I thought we had this is a 2 badge. That's awesome, Tony. Hey, man, congrats. And I thought we had higher badges than 2, but I could be wrong. I can check that again. Tony, hey, man, thanks for being here for so long. And these badges just keep inching up. Yeah, and Jonah Finn is saying the first trial and the grand jury transcripts that 11th has. So Jonah Finn, if you're talking about, again, Epstein, he didn't have a trial in his first time either. And I don't think he probably even had grand jury transcripts on that first time. I think they were going to present to the grand jury, but Epstein's lawyer got a plea deal. His lawyers got a plea deal before that actually happened. Like they were going to impanel him, I think, on 57 counts. And you can have lawyers before you're charged. It's like pre-charge investigation. And you can have lawyers working with the cops, working with the prosecutors who are, running the investigation and even get in there before the grand jury is even impaneled. So Epstein, his first case was a plea deal and it was in state court. And it wasn't even it was for bad stuff, but it wasn't what a lot of people say. It was like solicitation of a minor. So solicitation is asking. Okay. It's not like I don't think he even pleaded guilty for anything involving contact. It was solicitation of a minor and it was solicitation for prostitution. So like when he took a guilty plea, he didn't, I think, I have to read it again, but not even any contact. Like he didn't get punished for any physical contact, massages, abuse, it's just solicitation is all it was. So, and it was a plea deal. So all of that evidence was buried. No grand jury transcripts, no trial there. The second one, there were grand jury proceedings and we learned a lot more about those, but it was just basically Maureen Comey. They were like 30 to 90 minute indictments in grand juries, like slide deck, one agent, Maureen Comey, in and out of 45 minutes for the Ghislaine Maxwell case. The Jeffrey Epstein new charges before he died was probably a lot more extensive, but yeah, we could get those. We could get the grand jury transcripts from his latest indictment in 19, but it's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. That's why that plea deal was so ridiculous, because he didn't even get ultimately convicted of his most heinous things. It was just solicitation of prostitution and solicitation of a minor for the purposes of prostitution, meaning it's like a preparatory offense. Like he didn't actually do it. He was just asking to do it. And he took that plea. So you're like, oh gosh, he got away with so much. Tony Hay Muckets. Yeah, at this point, you probably need a 4 and a 5 year one too. Yeah, I'm wondering if it goes out that far. It's like, I have to go in there and check those settings. I didn't think anybody would stay here for 2 years. So he might have maxed out at like 2 years. Then they abandoned ship, man. Because you can only take so much, you know. I have to live with myself, but you don't, which is nice. It's good for you. So, my friends, it has been a beautiful stream. Thank you for squeezing in those comments and those donos at the end. And thanks for being here. Thanks for being members and supporting our work. Thank you for liking this video and subscribing if you haven't already done that. It is now members only time, and we're going to debrief, see what else you have to say. Thank you for joining us. If you care to do that, you can hit that join button on YouTube or join us at Locals, watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We will debrief today and, of course, be back on our members only stream in the morning. Hope to see you there. Before we wrap it up, big thank yous to our mods and meme smiths in the house who mod the fort down for us and keep things nice and orderly around here. Big thank yous go out to our friends, Donut Mind Me, our friend John, Muffin Rando in the house. Big thanks to K Bean and Carrie B. We got Janek, Dog Digger, and Jigum, Elliot, Just Rhonda. I know I'm missing somebody. I lost my cadence, you know, but thank you for all of our amazing mods. We're very grateful for you. We, of course, will pause here. We're coming back tomorrow. We're going to get into it again. And in order to do that appropriately, we are going to need to see you right back here so that together, with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. Make it a beautiful night, my friends. Sleep very well. We'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching, my beautiful friends. Now it's that time where the stream must end. You brought the heat with every chat and line. Together we expose corruption. One more time we dove in the truth where the media hides. Lit up the lies with receipts on all sides. The fight isn't over, but we made them sweat. We ain't done yet, no, not just yet. Because together we are watching the watchers. Truth on our side. Watching the watchers. We won't be denied. Watching the watchers. Eyes open wide. Fighting for freedom with nothing to hide. Drop a like and don't forget to share. And bring a friend who's ready to care. Tomorrow's lies are just today's news, but here we see through